There are moments in life that stay frozen in your memory. For me, it was when Jessica pointed to our living room door and said those words. We had been married for 12 years. Our friends were completely silent around us, wine glasses suspended in midair. "You have two options, Michael. Get in line or get out." The room spun at that moment. Something inside me shattered, not out of sadness, but from an absolute and devastating clarity. After years of trying to save our marriage, I finally understood that there was nothing left to save. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. I'm 39. I'm a financial advisor, the owner of a life that looked perfect in the social media photos Jessica loved to post. A beautiful house in the suburbs of Chicago, annual trips to Europe, Sunday brunches with a select group of friends. Everything seemed perfect. Until it wasn't anymore. Today, 6 months after leaving through the door she pointed at, I'm sitting in my new apartment trying to process how I ended up here. How I went from a dedicated husband to a man who abandoned his marriage in front of a room full of people. The story doesn't start that night. It starts way before, when we were happy. I met Jessica in 2011 during a corporate retreat in Lake Geneva. I had just been promoted. She worked for another company in marketing and had that confidence I always admired. We talked for hours on the hotel's porch that night. Jessica had plans, ambitions, and a clear vision for the future. I fell in love with that determination. Our wedding happened fast, less than a year later. We bought our first house together and planned every detail of our future. 2 kids by 35, promotions for both of us, a bigger house at 40. We were a team. I admired how nothing could stand in her way, how she turned plans into reality. The early years were wonderful. We traveled, built a social life with other ambitious couples like us, and worked hard for every promotion. Jessica was brilliant at everything she did, and I felt lucky to have chosen her. "Let's be different from other couples," she used to say. "Let's be the ones who get everything." And I believed it. I really believed we would be the exception. For years ago, Jessica got pregnant. It wasn't part of the plan at the time, but we adapted to the idea quickly. We bought books about pregnancy, started planning the baby's room. Jessica even cut back on her workload, something I had never imagined she would do. At 11 weeks, we lost the baby. The doctor called it a common event, as if that could lessen our pain. Jessica stayed silent on the drive home. I tried holding her hand, but she pulled it away and stared out the window. "I have to work tomorrow," was all she said. The following week, she dove into work like never before. She would get home after midnight and leave before dawn. At first, I understood. Everyone processes grief differently. I tried talking to her and suggesting couples therapy, but Jessica insisted she was fine. "I'm focused on the future, Michael. We should do the same." I accepted her distance as temporary. Meanwhile, my own sorrow remained buried. I had no one to talk to about the loss I felt, about the future I had started to imagine that suddenly vanished. The months turned into a year. Our life went on, but it was different. Jessica was promoted to marketing director. I also moved up in my career, but the achievements felt empty since we didn't have time to celebrate them together. The little things began to pile up. Dinners with friends where Jessica was physically present but mentally absent, checking her emails. My comments about the day received automatic responses. Sex, once frequent and intimate, became rare and mechanical when it did happen. One night, I prepared a special dinner to celebrate her birthday. She arrived 2 hours late, and the risotto was ruined. "Sorry, I had an emergency meeting," she said without even looking at the table I'd set. She didn't even notice the flowers. We sat in silence while she ate quickly, constantly checking her phone. "Do you still want to try having kids?" I asked that night. Now isn't the right time. Maybe next year, she replied, walking upstairs without waiting for me. That's when I realized we were living parallel lives under the same roof. We had come to communicate mainly through notes on the fridge and text messages. Our friends didn't notice. In public, we were experts at faking it. A year ago, Jessica's company hired a new VP of marketing, Daniel Reynolds. Young, charismatic, coming from New York with innovative ideas. Jessica started mentioning him during the rare times she talked about work. Daniel had vision. Daniel understood the market. Daniel appreciated her ideas. Daniel asked me to lead the new international project, she commented during dinner, her eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen in years. I noticed subtle changes. New clothes, a different perfume, meetings that lasted late into the night. One evening, I saw one of his messages appear on her phone screen. I missed your laugh today. Nothing explicit, but enough to feed my suspicions. When I asked about Daniel, Jessica rolled her eyes. It's just work, Michael. Finally, someone recognizes my potential. You're coming home late every night, I noted. We barely talk. I'm building my career. I thought you supported that. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe it was just professional admiration. But the doubt had been planted, growing like a weed between us. One May weekend, I made an impulsive decision. I booked a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, just for me. I didn't tell Jessica right away, maybe because I already knew how she would react. On Thursday, I left a note on the fridge. I'm heading to the mountains tomorrow. I'll be back Sunday night. When I got home from work, Jessica was in the kitchen holding the note, looking perplexed. What does this mean? We have dinner with the Warrens on Saturday. I had completely forgotten about the dinner. It was an event with her company's director and his wife. An important event for her career, as she always stressed. I canceled my part, I replied, surprising both of us with my firmness. You can still go. Jessica stared at me, as if I had suggested selling the house. You can't just disappear like that. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth. That I need some time alone. Time alone? She let out a forced laugh. What you really need is to grow up and understand responsibilities. Cancel that ridiculous trip and come to dinner with me. I continued packing my bag, feeling a strange calm. I'm not canceling. I need this, Jessica. Is it because of him? She abruptly asked. Who do you mean? That guy from your work. Scott. He planted those ideas in your head. That was partly true. Scott had noticed my unhappiness even before I admitted it to myself. He was the one who suggested I needed space to think. But the decision was mine. This is about me, I replied. About what I'm feeling. Or rather, what I haven't felt in a long time. Jessica folded her arms. And what would that be? Presence? Importance? Being seen? The words came out before I could filter them. Her face hardened. If you leave through that door tomorrow, Michael, it will change everything between us. I nodded. Maybe that's exactly what we need. The next morning, I left before she woke up. I drove for hours with the windows down, feeling a mix of terror and freedom. The cabin was rustic, isolated among century-old pines. No Wi-Fi, weak cell coverage. For the first time in years, I was truly alone with my thoughts. I spent hours hiking on trails, sitting by a stream, watching the starry sky. I realized I hadn't done something like this since before I met Jessica. We were always too busy, planning too much, working too much. On the second day, Scott sent me a message when I finally got a signal. How's it going? I replied. I'm not sure our marriage will survive, but I'm breathing for the first time in years. It was there, with the mountains around me, that I admitted the truth I had been avoiding. I wasn't just dissatisfied, I was deeply unhappy. And maybe Jessica was too. Maybe we were holding on to a version of our relationship that no longer existed. On Sunday, while packing my things to go back, I felt a clarity that scared me. Something had fundamentally changed inside me. It wasn't anger or resentment, it was determination. I deserved more. We both deserved more. When I got home, Jessica was in the living room with her laptop open, as if it were any other Sunday. She didn't ask about my trip. She just said, "I made up that you were sick. Miranda Warren sent her get well wishes." That night we slept in silence, each on our own side of the bed, an abyss between us. The following weeks were tense. I tried starting serious conversations several times, but Jessica always deflected. "Not now, Michael." Or, "Can we talk about it later?" Later never came. It was her idea to organize game night. To normalize things, she explained. She invited the usual couples, Rachel and David, Lauren and Tom, Melissa and Ken. Couples perfectly fitting our facade of happiness. I spent the day preparing appetizers, arranging the living room, opening the wine. Part of me hoped that this effort of normality could somehow fill the gap between us. Jessica arrived from work an hour before the guests, enough time to change and ask if I remembered to buy the cheese that Lauren liked. The evening began like many others. Superficial conversations about work, other people's kids, and the new series everyone was watching. Jessica was radiant, the perfect hostess, laughing loudly and filling glasses. No one noticed how rarely her eyes met mine, or how she kept physical distance even when we were side by side. During the board game, David mentioned the vacation they were planning for their anniversary. 10 years deserves something special, he said, kissing Rachel's hand. And you too? Any plans for your 12-year anniversary? Lauren asked, looking at us. Before Jessica could respond with some polished lie, I heard my own voice. Actually, we haven't really talked about the future lately. The discomfort was immediate. Jessica shot me a sharp look. Michael is just in a philosophical mood, she said, trying to make it a joke. I took a slow sip of wine. It's not a phase. It's a fact. We haven't been really talking in a long time. The silence in the room grew heavy. Jessica forced a laugh. Should we continue the game? It's your turn, Tom. But something inside me had snapped, as if an invisible dam had burst. Actually, I think we should call it a night, I said, placing my glass on the table. Jessica and I need to talk. The faces around showed surprise and embarrassment. Jessica abruptly stood up. Don't be ridiculous. The night has just begun. I'm not being ridiculous. I'm being honest, maybe for the first time in years. Michael. Her tone sounded like a warning. Don't you see? I looked around at our friends. Tonight is all an act. We pretend to be a happy couple, but we sleep on opposite sides of the bed. We barely speak. Enough. Jessica slammed her hand on the table. Can you all give us a minute? My husband clearly had too much to drink. No one moved. The awkwardness was palpable. I'm not drunk, I replied calmly. I'm just tired. Tired of pretending everything's okay when it isn't. Jessica visibly trembled, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. If you had something to say, you could have waited until we were alone. How? You've been avoiding any serious conversation for months. Maybe years. So you decide to do this now? In front of everyone. Her voice faltered. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Melissa mumbled something about waiting in the kitchen, but Jessica interrupted her. No, stay here. Since Michael wants an audience, let's finish this show. She turned to me, her eyes burning with fury. What do you want, Michael? Do you want me to admit that our marriage isn't perfect? No marriage is. I want you to admit that we don't even have a marriage anymore. We're just in a convenience partnership. Two strangers sharing a mortgage." Her face tightened. "If you're so unhappy, then why are you still here?" That question hung in the air. Why was I still there? Out of habit? Fear? The answer escaped me. "You know what I think?" Jessica continued, her voice dangerously controlled. "I think you're having an early midlife crisis. The mountain trip, all this drama. It's pathetic." Her words hit me like a slap. Is that how she saw me? Pathetic? "Jessica!" Rachel tried to intervene. "No, Rachel. He wants honesty." Jessica stepped toward me. "You have two options, Michael. Get in line or get out. I'm not going to keep living in this ridiculous limbo." The room spun around me. 12 years reduced to an ultimatum in front of people we barely really knew. The cruelty of the choice hit me like a wave. I had not asked for a conversation or to fix things. It was simply, get in line or get out. I looked around at the uncomfortable faces, then at Jessica. In the depths of her eyes, I saw not just anger, but indifference. The certainty that I would cave in, as always. "I think I'll leave," I said softly. The words almost slipped out, but as soon as they did, I felt their weight and truth. "What?" Jessica looked genuinely surprised. "You gave me a choice. I'm choosing to leave." I slept on the couch that night after everyone quickly left. The next morning, I packed my bags in silence. Jessica stood in the doorway of our bedroom, arms crossed. "You're going to regret this," was all she said. The first few weeks were a blur of logistics and raw emotions. I rented a temporary apartment downtown, hired a lawyer, and started untangling our finances. Scott lent me an air mattress until I could buy a real bed. My brother Brandon flew in from Austin for the weekend to help set up the few pieces of furniture I bought. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked as we assembled a bookshelf. "It's not about what I want," I replied. "It's about what I need. I needed to breathe." Brandon nodded. "Did she call you?" "Only emails about the practical stuff. Mostly through her lawyer." I expected more anger, more drama. Instead, our divorce moved along with a cold efficiency that highlighted how far apart we'd grown. We divided our assets, sold the house, and set up agreements. With no kids, the process was technically simple, though emotionally complicated. I lost weight in the first few weeks. I'd forget to eat, and sleep was hard to come by. Loneliness hit me at random moments, opening an empty fridge, watching a show we used to watch together, hearing a song that played at our wedding. Rachel was the first of our mutual friends to reach out. We met for coffee one Sunday. "Jessica is dating Daniel," she said bluntly. It hurt less than I thought it would. Maybe because I had already suspected it, or because my heart had already started to heal. "I hope they're happy," I replied, surprised that I actually meant it. I established new routines. Waking up early. Running in the park by my apartment. Cooking for myself, something I had always enjoyed but neglected. I started keeping a journal, processing everything that had happened. At work, I asked for a transfer to a new project, something that challenged me. My boss noticed the change. "You seem more focused," he commented. "I have more clarity now," I replied. I found a permanent apartment 3 months after the separation. A loft in an old renovated building, completely different from the suburban house I once shared with Jessica. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, large windows. A place that was entirely mine, decorated to my taste. I bought a bicycle, something Jessica always considered too dangerous. I began riding on the weekends, exploring parts of the city I'd never visited before. The lawyer called on a Tuesday. "The divorce papers are ready for signing. Jessica has already signed her part. We set an appointment for Thursday. I felt a lump in my throat as I hung up. 12 years, about to officially end with a single signature. The day before, surprisingly, Jessica sent me a direct message. "Can we meet for coffee tomorrow before the signing?" I agreed, suggesting the cafe where we first met. A sentimental choice that caught me off guard. I arrived early, picking a table in the back. When she walked in, I got that familiar feeling. Jessica always caught attention. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her clothes were immaculate. But something was different. A heaviness on her shoulders that I hadn't noticed before. "Thank you for coming," she said as she sat down. "Of course," I replied, unsure of what else to say. We ordered our coffees. The silence between us was strange, not hostile, just unfamiliar after so many years of knowing each other. "You look well," she finally commented. "I'm better. And you?" Jessica just shrugged. "Busy. The international project is taking off." "And Daniel?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She hesitated. "We're, getting to know each other. It's complicated." We both nodded, understanding the unsaid. All relationships are complicated. Ours had been too. "Michael, She took a deep breath. "I should have realized how unhappy you were. I should have listened." Her admission caught me off guard. "I should have spoken up more clearly too. Before exploding like that. That night." She shook her head. "It was horrible of me. The ultimatum, in front of everyone. I never thought you would actually leave. Honestly, neither did I. What changed?" I considered the question. "I realized I deserved more than being just an accessory in your life. And you deserved more than a husband who was only there out of obligation." Jessica stirred her coffee spoon for a few moments before speaking again. "You know what's strange? Since you left, I've been thinking a lot about the baby." The mention caught me off guard. We never talked about the lost pregnancy. "Me too," I admitted. "More than you can imagine. I think that's when we started losing ourselves," she said. "I didn't know how to deal with that pain, so I just didn't. I tried to talk about it a few times." "I know." Jessica looked out the window. "But every time you brought it up, it was like reopening a wound. So I drowned myself in work because that was the only place I still felt in control." She paused. "It was wrong and unfair to you." I sat quietly, absorbing her words. For years, I had imagined this conversation, this admission. Now that it was happening, I didn't feel the validation I expected. Just a quiet sadness for what we might have been if we'd been honest sooner. "Both of us made mistakes," I finally replied. "I should have pushed us to talk more or suggested couples therapy. Instead, I just waited for things to get better on their own. You were always too patient with me," Jessica said with a sad smile. "I guess I took that for granted. And you were always so determined. I admired that about you until I started feeling like I was an obstacle in your way." Jessica shook her head. "I never saw you that way." "Really? Really?" She hesitated. "You were my safe haven. The one who never pushed or demanded anything. Maybe I took advantage of that." A comfortable silence fell over us, filled only with the ambient sounds of the cafe. It was strange how we could finally speak openly now that we were making it official. "And Daniel?" I asked again. "Is it serious?" She shrugged. "It started before our official end. Not physically, but there was something there. I owe you that honesty." I nodded, feeling less hurt than I thought I would with that confession. "I had a feeling. I don't know if it's going to last," she continued. "He's as ambitious as I am. Maybe it's what we need from each other right now. Or maybe it's a mistake. Time will tell." We finished our coffees as the conversation shifted to more practical matters. The final sale of the house, the last details of the divorce. There was a tenderness between us that hadn't existed in the last years of our marriage. When it was time to go to the lawyer's office, Jessica hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Do you regret it? Regret leaving that night? Regret everything? Us?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't regret the years we spent together. We were happy for a long time. What I regret is how we ended, not being more honest with each other before it was too late." She nodded, her eyes welling up slightly. "That's fair." At the lawyer's office, we signed the papers side by side. 12 years of history reduced to a few pages of legal terms. When we finished, we stood on the sidewalk, not really knowing how to say goodbye. "Good luck, Michael," she finally said, extending her hand. I ignored her hand and instead gave her a brief hug. "Good luck to you too, Jessica." She smiled, that smile that first captivated me years ago. "You know, you were too good for me. Always. I don't think it's about being good or bad. We just went in different directions." Jessica nodded, adjusting the strap of her bag. "I have a meeting. I need to go." "Of course. Take care," she said, turning to leave. "You too." I watched as she walked down the promenade, as determined as ever. A part of me would always love the person she was and what we had. But for the first time, I truly felt I was ready to move on. On my way home, I called Scott. "It's done," I said. "How do you feel?" he asked. "At peace," I replied, surprised to realize it was true. That night, sitting on the balcony of my apartment, I opened a bottle of wine I had saved for this moment. Not to celebrate the end of my marriage, but to mark the beginning of a new chapter. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows between the buildings. Somehow, it felt fitting. 6 weeks after signing the divorce, Rachel invited me to dinner at her place. "Nothing big," she assured me. "Just a few friends. You need to get out more." At first, I hesitated. Social events still made me anxious, especially with our old circle of friends. But Rachel insisted. "David is making that risotto you like. And my sister is in town. You two should meet." The mention of her sister made me uncomfortable. "Rachel, I'm not ready for arranged meetings." "It's not a setup," she protested. "Emily is newly divorced, too. You could, I don't know, swap war stories." I eventually agreed, more to please Rachel than for any other reason. I arrived with a bottle of wine, prepared for a night of forced small talk and polite questions about how I was handling everything. The Thompson house was lively but not crowded. Some familiar faces, some new. Rachel guided me through the living room to a woman who was looking at the bookshelf. "Emily, this is Michael, the guy I told you about. Michael, this is my sister Emily." Emily Thompson didn't look much like Rachel. Where Rachel was outgoing and polished, Emily seemed more reserved, with a calm presence. Short brown hair, attentive eyes behind thin-framed glasses. She smiled as she greeted me. "Rachel told me you work in finance," she said. "It must be fascinating." The way she said "fascinating" clearly meant the opposite, and I couldn't help but laugh. "About as fascinating as crunching spreadsheets can be." Emily smiled. "Sorry, I've always been bad at small talk. I'm a literature professor. Numbers intimidate me." The conversation flowed surprisingly well. Emily was a university professor, specializing in 20th century American literature. Newly divorced after 8 years of marriage. "No drama," she explained. "Just two people realizing they wanted different things out of life." As we talked, I realized it was the first time in a long time that I was genuinely interested in getting to know someone new. There were no hidden agendas or any need to impress. Just two people discovering common interests and differences. During dinner, We sat side by side, our conversation continuing, while the others discussed politics and local gossip. Emily had lived abroad for a few years, teaching at universities in France and Spain. She enjoyed hiking, independent films, and cooking complicated dishes that rarely turned out as expected. "I have an impressive collection of culinary failures," she confessed, "but I keep trying." By the end of the night, we exchanged numbers almost casually. "There's a screening of film noir at the old downtown cinema next month," I mentioned. "If you're into that sort of thing." "I love film noir," she replied. "Let me know when you go." 2 days later, I messaged her about the screening dates. She replied quickly, suggesting we have dinner before the movie. Our first outing wasn't an official date, just two friends watching The Maltese Falcon and talking about books, films, and life experiences. The second time we met, we visited a used book fair. We wandered for hours between the stalls, discussing authors and sharing stories. It wasn't until the third time, during a walk in the botanical garden, that we finally called it a date. "This is a date, right?" Emily asked directly, as we admired an orchid garden. "Just so we're clear, I'd like it to be," I replied. "Me too." The first kiss happened that night at her apartment door. Natural, with no pressure or expectations. Emily was unlike anyone I had ever met. Direct without being rude, smart without being pretentious, kind without being subservient. Our relationship moved slowly, both of us aware of our pasts and cautious about the future. I introduced Emily to Scott and a few close friends I had kept after the divorce. Everyone commented on how much more relaxed I seemed, more like myself. "You smile more," Scott observed after a dinner with Emily. "It's been a while since I saw you like that." In August, 6 months after our first meeting, Emily invited me to join her at a conference in Boston where she was presenting a paper on Hemingway. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's important for your career." "That's exactly why I want you there," she replied simply. "To share it with me." It was during this trip that I realized how different our relationship was from anything I had experienced before. Emily didn't need me to complete her. She had her own life, career, and friends. Being with me was a choice, not a necessity or obligation. On the last night in Boston, sitting in a small restaurant overlooking the harbor, Emily asked about Jessica. "Do you still talk to her?" "Occasionally. Mostly about practical matters. She's with Daniel now, officially." "And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question honestly. "I hope she's happy." "I really do hope so." Emily smiled. "That's a good answer." "And you? Do you still talk with your ex?" "Sometimes. He moved to Seattle and is now working at a startup. He looks happy." She paused. "You know, for a long time, I felt guilty about the end of our marriage. As if I had failed in some way." "Me too," I admitted. "As if I should have tried harder, done more. But sometimes," she continued, "the greatest act of love is knowing when something isn't working and having the courage to move on." Her words hit deep. For months after leaving that fateful night, I had questioned whether I had acted impulsively, whether I had given up too easily. Now I understood that my leaving was not the end, but the beginning, the first step to reclaiming my life. That night, walking back to the hotel hand in hand with Emily, I felt immense gratitude for the journey that led me to that moment. The pain, the losses, the moments of uncertainty, all of it had brought me to this new start. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked, noticing my silence. "How unpredictable life is," I replied. "A year ago, I never imagined I'd be here now." "Regretful?" "Not at all." Emily squeezed my hand. "Neither do I." When we got back to Chicago, I suggested that she leave a few clothes at my apartment. A small step, nothing dramatic. Emily agreed with a smile. I think I can spare a drawer. We weren't in a rush. There were no 5 or 10-year plans, no checklist of goals to achieve. Just two adults learning to build something real day by day. I discovered that true intimacy doesn't come from grand declarations or promises, but from small, honest moments shared. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. Maybe this is what reclaiming my life means. Not just escaping what wasn't working, but having the courage to build something better. Something real.